Coming up in today's newscast, Israeli jets strike multiple Iranian and Syrian targets in Syria. The Palestinian Authority announces that it will no longer accept American funding. And Israel's agriculture ministry releases a new Tubishvat-holiday directive to stop eating so much dried fruit. Israeli Air Force fighters reportedly struck multiple Iranian, Hezbollah, and Syrian targets near Damascus Monday morning, killing 11 pro-regime and Iranian fighters.
אמש הלם חיל האוויר בעוצמה במטרות איראניות בסוריה, לאחר שאיראן שיגרה משם טיל לעבר שטחנו. איננו עוברים לסדר היום מול מעשי תוקפנות אלה, מול ניסיונות איראן להתבסס צבאית בסוריה, ומול ההצהרות המפורשות של איראן, שבכוונתה להשמיד את ישראל, כפי שאמר רק עכשיו מפקד חיל האוויר של איראן. אנו פועלים גם נגד איראן וגם נגד הכוחות הסוריים שמסייעים לתוקפנות האיראנית. מי שמנסה לפגוע בנו, אנו פוגעים בו. מי שמאיים להשמיד אותנו, יישא במלוא האחריות.
Targets included weapons storage sites, an area at the Damascus International Airport, an Iranian intelligence site, an Iranian military training camp, and multiple Syrian surface-to-air missile defense launchers. This in response to a missile being fired from Syria into the Israeli Golan Heights Sunday afternoon. Those Syrian reports claim that their initial and rare daytime attack on Sunday was itself a retaliation for alleged Israeli airstrikes over the weekend. Regardless, the Iron Dome intercepted the Syrian projectile, and the IDF claimed that no one in the area was in immediate danger. Yet the IDF added that, quote, by firing towards Israeli civilians, Iran once again proved that it is attempting to entrench itself in Syria, endangering the state of Israel and regional stability. We will continue operating determinately to thwart these attempts, end quote. Prime Minister Netanyahu then reiterated these comments on his way back from his landmark visit to the African nation of Chad.
יש לנו מדיניות קבועה לפגוע בהתבססות האיראנית בסוריה ולפגוע בכל מי שמנסה לפגוע בנו. המדיניות הזאת לא משתנה כשאני בארץ, וגם לא כשאני בביקור היסטורי בצ'אד. היא קבועה.
Army officials are clearly expecting additional return fire or some other such escalation in the region, however, as Operation Northern Shield comes to completion and Syrian state media reports against Israel's aggression. Further, following the latest pre-dawn assaults, the IDF has closed the Mount Hermon skiing area for at least a day and until further notice. Returning now to the studio with more on the overnight strikes in Damascus is Brigadier General Ram Shmueli, the former head of Israeli Air Force Intelligence and chairman of HaShomer Chadash. Ram, it is such a pleasure to have you here again with us. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Aaron.
All right, so first of all, what can you tell us, because I know that you're still very much in the intelligence community and in the loop. What can you tell us maybe a little bit about the Iron Dome and how the last few days kind of
I think that the story, even though there are a lot of politics around it and a lot of people interview about it, because the first time, this time it was published. But the story is the young officer, the age of 21, that's sitting in Iron Dome, and then he got a kind of a missile, a ground-to-ground missile from Syrian territory to Israel, and now we have to decide it. The chain of command is very simple. Those young men and women, the age of 21, 22, they decided because they protect the state of Israel. So it is both these young officers that decided that they have to intercept it now in order to make the interception above Syrian territory. Mm-hmm. It is the pilot, the age of 22 or 23, that taking off. It is the people in the ground control of the Air Force, the age of 25. Those are the people. Yes, there is the Air Force commander and people like me, general like me, that I used to be in the headquarters and the policy. But the daily routine of protecting the state of Israel or to attack batteries that are threatening Israel, those are young and men and women of the Israeli Air Force. And this is the issue. And about what's happened, actually, we retaliate last night very aggressively. We started with Iranian targets. Those targets are kind of an infrastructure that Iran trying to build again and again in Syria in order to confront Israel. But more than that, then there was a lot of launch of ground-to-air missiles against our pilots, and then they have to slew their weapon in order to destroy those batteries. And those batteries are Syrian batteries, but it is Russian-made batteries.
The S-300s?
It is either the 17 and the 22, and those are very new and efficient batteries. And we told the Syrian ahead of time, please don't interfere, even though it is above your territory, but we are attacking the Iranian. But once they launch those missiles against our airplane, we destroy them. And there is a lot of release about how we have done it. But we destroyed ground-to-air batteries in order to protect our airplanes.
So, moving back onto Iran, though, and the Iranian threat in the region, how likely is it that Israel will launch a preemptive strike against real, in Iran, Iranian targets?
This is a different question. This is a strategic decision. This is not for us to decide. So it's very easy to speak about it. So I can share my thought. Because
I mean, do you think that that's kind of the way that we're eventually heading, or is this going to continue being a battle fought on the front of Syria?
I think that we have to do it silently. We have to confront Iran silently, but always to remember, we are not against the Iranian people. We are against the Ayatollah regime. And this regime is very dangerous, not only for Israel. We can protect ourselves. This is regardless if the Americans are in Syria or not. This is our duty to protect the state of Israel, and we know how to do it. This is our duty. But the issue of Iran, it's a big threat to the region. It's a big threat to Saudi Arabia. It's a big threat. Even terrorist cell all over Europe. For example, the Germans, a month or two ago, they forbidden the airplanes, 7 cargo airplanes, Iranian company, 747, because those 747 are taking ammunition everywhere in Syria and, of course, even other places in the world. This is a very dangerous regime. We are doing our share, but the world have to be partners in order to confront. This week, they have a malfunction in ballistic missile. This ballistic missile is even not aiming to Israel. It can reach even Europe. This is a very dangerous regime.
So, okay, again then, is a military response in Syria and potentially in Iran the only thing that we can do? Because I know, what about cyber attacks? How effective might they be? Or is that really kind of just a support for something a little bit more heavy?
A lot of things that we have to keep silent. And even our attack yesterday in Syria, we publish it, but I think that we have to go back to the silent way of fighting this regime. Right. So, of course, if you're talking about cyber attacks and other things, this is not something to discuss here. I think that you better do things than publish it.
All right, Brigadier General, thank you so much for coming in again. Speaking from the capital of N'Djamena on Sunday, Chad President Idris Deby and Prime Minister Netanyahu officially announced the resumption of diplomatic ties between their two nations. This during Netanyahu's brief but historic visit to Chad as the first sitting Israeli Prime Minister ever to do so. It also follows Deby's surprise visit to Israel in November last year. But this means that Israel now has formal diplomatic relations with a record 161 world nations, and according to the two leaders, this newest partnership will be greatly beneficial for both. At their joint conference, Netanyahu spoke of all the important trade that is now to come.
There is a lot that we can do together.
Il y a beaucoup de choses qu'on pourrait faire ensemble.
And we discussed how to deepen our cooperation in every field, beginning with security.
Donc nous avons discuté comment élargir et approfondir notre coopération, surtout dans le domaine de sécurité,
but also agriculture,
mais aussi l'agriculture,
food, water, energy, health,
la médecine,
and many more.
Et d'autres, nombreux autres domaines.
And I believe that this cooperation will build a better, safer, and more prosperous future for both our peoples.
But in addition to such surface benefits, the Israeli premier again reiterated how important it is for Israel to expand relations both within Africa and within the Arab and Muslim world.
אנחנו מתקבלים כאן בכבוד, כפי שקיבלנו את הנשיא דבי בארץ בכבוד רב. ישראל פורצת לעולם המוסלמי. זו תוצאה של עבודה מאומצת בשנים האחרונות. אנחנו עושים היסטוריה, ואנחנו הופכים את ישראל לכוח עולמי עולה.
And perhaps as evidence of Israel's growing inroads in Africa, at least, the Prime Minister's flight was allowed to return home over South Sudanese airspace, which is controlled by northern Sudan, a nation that has no diplomatic ties to Israel. And finally, Netanyahu promised towards the end of his speech that just a month ahead of the upcoming April elections in Israel, an Israeli delegation of various economic leaders will arrive in Chad to explore the many possibilities that President Deby and the Chad government are open to offer.
So I believe in your future. I believe in our future. I believe in the future of our friendship.
Back in the West Bank, 2 IDF soldiers were lightly injured Monday morning while escorting Jewish worshippers to the area of Joseph's tomb in Nablus. They were evacuated to a hospital nearby and are recovering well. The incident occurred while en route to the tomb with a group of nearly 1,500 Jewish worshippers. Clashes broke out between Israeli soldiers and Palestinians who threw stones. Despite this, prayer services at the tomb continued as scheduled without disruption. Elsewhere, however, Palestinians threw Molotov cocktails and stones at Israeli soldiers during an operation in the Ephraim area of the West Bank. The IDF responded with crowd dispersal methods, and additionally, as the evening progressed, Israeli army and Shin Bet officials reportedly arrested around 30 Palestinians across the West Bank for questioning, and security forces also found and seized a Carl Gustav automatic weapon, the same kind often used by Palestinian shooting terrorists, as they're typically made in small independent shops and are sold on black markets. Meanwhile, as Qatar's third $15 million payment to Hamas is transferred this week in the Palestinian Authority, Palestinian officials have informed the United States that the PA will now refuse to accept American security aid funding as soon as February 2019. This in response to the recently passed American Anti-Terrorism Cooperation Act, or ATCA. The news was broken to U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo in a letter written by PA Prime Minister Rami Hamdallah in December 2018. And in the letter obtained by Israeli news network Ynet, Hamdallah explains that while the PA government is grateful for past economic support, ATCA has caused the U.S. economic aid to the PA to become a, quote, dividing force. He added then that, quote, in light of these developments, the government of Palestine respectfully informs the United States government that as of January 31st, 2019, it fully disclaims and no longer wishes to accept any form of assistance referenced in ATCA, end quote. Under the new ATCA law, American courts would have expanded jurisdiction over any case and involving any foreign party accused of aiding or supporting terror, provided that that foreign party also accepts United States financial aid. This would mean dozens of cases involving American victims and tens of millions of dollars in damages could be brought against the PA and the PLO and tried successfully in American courts. So rather than ending financial payments to terrorists and their families or opening themselves up to lawsuits, the PA will stop accepting further funding completely. Initial reports are still unconfirmed, but according to senior Palestinian Authority officials speaking on Sunday, Palestinian-American citizen Issam Akel has finally been released from PA custody. Speaking to Reuters on condition of anonymity, the officials said that, quote, Akel holds an American passport and he was handed over to the United States authorities upon their request, end quote. Neither the U.S. nor Akel's family, however, has been available for comment. Akel was first arrested for taking part in an East Jerusalem property sale, allegedly without the support or permission of his partners living in the Palestinian Authority. But at any rate, selling land to Jews or Israelis is considered treason in the Palestinian Authority and is punishable by death or at least life in prison with hard labor. Well, Akel was convicted by a West Bank court in December and has since been the center of a massive conflict between Israel, the PA, and the United States. And in the wake of Akel's arrest, Israeli forces arrested 30-some-odd Palestinian officials and operatives for unlawful activity in Jerusalem. This includes the Palestinian-appointed mayor of Jerusalem, who was detained as a suspect for questioning multiple times. Additionally, as an American citizen, the United States has been arguing that Akel has broken no laws to begin with. But from the Palestinian perspective, as reiterated just this past weekend by the PA's official broadcaster, Palestine TV, even shopping at an Israeli supermarket can amount to treason, let alone selling property to the so-called enemy. As explained by Fatah spokesperson Osama Kawasma, purchasing Israeli goods is tantamount to, quote, supporting the occupation and its economy that is used to kill our youth, confiscate our land, build colonies, and Judaize Jerusalem, end quote. In other news, Martin Luther King Jr. Day was commemorated last week, reminding us all of the years of struggling for equality that are unfortunately far from over. Yet instead of invoking King's memory in a way consistent with his words and actions, New York Times writer Michelle Alexander used King's legacy to justify attacks against the Jewish state. In a lengthy op-ed entitled "Time to Break the Silence on Palestine," Alexander wrote that we must honor King's message by condemning Israel's actions in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, Gaza, etc., adding that, quote, "The days when critiques of Zionism and the actions of the State of Israel can be written off as anti-Semitism are coming to an end," end quote. But there are three inherent issues with these and Alexander's other statements. First is that critique of Israeli policies is enshrined in Israeli law and is practiced in Israel robustly, as it is in many other healthy democracies. While critique of Zionism is in and of itself anti-Semitic, as it attacks Israel's right to exist and the Jewish people's right to self-determination. The second issue is that at no time would Martin Luther King Jr. have endorsed these statements either. In fact, he spoke quite publicly, clearly, and extensively on how he felt about anti-Semitism, Zionism, Israel, and the Jews, with one quote even being that, quote, "When people criticize Zionists, they mean the Jews. You're talking anti-Semitism," end quote.
The whole world must see that Israel must exist and has a right to exist and is one of the great outposts of democracy in the world.
My Jewish brothers and sisters said to me amid anti-Semitism anywhere, "We don't need your support. We have enough Jewish power to deal with this problem ourselves." I would still take a stand against anti-Semitism because it's wrong, it's unjust, and it's evil. If my Catholic brothers and sisters said to me amid bigotry toward Catholics, "We don't need your support in this because we have enough Catholic power to deal with it," I would still take a stand against bigotry toward Catholics because it is wrong, it is evil, and it is unjust.
And finally, the third issue with Alexander's op-ed is that, far from what the title suggests, silence on Palestine was certainly not broken. Actually, it's quite the opposite, as according to media watchdog Honest Reporting, Alexander at no point says anything about Palestinian terrorism, corruption in the Palestinian Authority, payments to terrorists, or Hamas's rejectionism. Looks like the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is taking a stand against the international boycott movement. Speaking at a town hall at Brock University in southwest Toronto, Trudeau blasted the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement against Israel as anti-Semitic, adding that BDS is contrary to Canadian values and intimidates Jewish students. The comments came in response to one attendee at the town hall who demanded the Canadian leader retract his previous condemnations of the BDS movement. The attendee argued that thousands of voters and academics like himself support BDS, and therefore Trudeau owed it to them to follow the so-called will of the people. But Trudeau was not having it. His response was that people need to understand that anti-Semitism has manifested not just as a targeting of individuals, but also as in the targeting of the Jewish Democratic State of Israel. He then went on to explain by quoting former Canadian Justice Minister Irwin Cotler's 3 Ds, i.e. the demonization of Israel, the double standard around Israel, and a delegitimization of the State of Israel. Finally, Trudeau added that in Canada, quote, "We have to recognize that there are things that aren't acceptable not because of foreign policy concerns, but because of Canadian values, and that it's not right to discriminate or to make someone feel unsafe on a college campus because of their religion. Yet, unfortunately, the BDS movement is often linked to those kinds of incidents." On a related note, last year, the Canadian Prime Minister also made a formal apology on behalf of his country for its refusal to accept over 900 Jewish refugees who were seeking asylum from Nazi Germany in 1939. They were aboard the German ocean liner MS St. Louis, and Canada turned the boat away. It eventually returned to Europe, though, where more than 250 of the refugees were later killed. Prime Minister Trudeau says that he will continue to condemn the BDS movement, though, but that Canada does support a two-state solution that should be negotiated directly by Israel and the Palestinians. Now, my next guest has only recently joined the ILTV team. She is the former host of Israel Weekly and the Debka Files, and now she's hosting an all-new program called The Jewish World, which airs tonight. So please join me in welcoming Lidar Garvey-Lazi. Lidar, as always, it is a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so tell us about the Jewish World. Tell us what we can expect and you know what it covers.
So the Jewish World, as the name suggests, talks about the Jewish world. We basically talk about the week's most pressing issues facing the Jewish state, the Jewish people, and the Jewish global community. So we're talking diaspora affairs as well then? Absolutely, yeah. The show deals a lot about issues that affect Israel, but also Jewish communities around the world.
All right, so we're talking, you know, BDS, new legislation, racist
So unfortunately, the reality is that a lot of issues affecting the Jewish world include anti-Semitism and BDS. So we do focus a lot on those, but we also have a lot of positive stories coming out of the Jewish world. So it's nice, kind of a nice mix.
And then, so, okay, you want to give us like a sneak peek, maybe like one or two topics that we're gonna talk about
Sure.
tonight?
Well, today's show, we do talk a little bit about anti-Semitism surrounding, for example, the Women's March. We had a story on that. And then we also had a great piece on Tubishvat, which today is Tubishvat. So we hosted someone from Keren Kayemet Israel, the Jewish National Fund, who came and talked about planting trees in Israel and about their activities in Jewish communities around the world.
So you have awesome guests, you have awesome stories, and all that. Wow, it's amazing. All right, so, and it airs tonight at 9, Jewish World at iltv.tv.
Tonight at 9.
Tonight at 9. Lidar Gavelazi, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
After years of delays, the new Ramon International Airport in Eilat has finally officially been inaugurated. Named for fallen Israeli astronaut Ilan Ramon and his son, fallen Israeli pilot Asaf Ramon, the $500 million airport in the Negev will begin taking in domestic flights as soon as February, and then operators will gradually increase to include international airlines arriving later in March. Israel is hoping that the new airport will boost international tourism to the Red Sea resort town of Eilat, ideally attracting over 1 million foreign visitors annually by the year 2025. Currently, foreign tourists are scarce in the winter months, though, when the temperatures in Eilat are a bit cooler and hotels operate at half capacity. And this is despite 2 airports already servicing Eilat. One is the old airport in the city center, which until now was mainly used for domestic flights, but it could not accommodate any larger aircrafts and was already filled to capacity with some 1.4 million domestic travelers. Then the other option was to fly into Eilat via the Ovda military airport, which takes in some international flights, but is a grueling 60 kilometers or 40 miles away from the city. The new Ramon airport, however, was designed to be able to serve 2.5 million passengers, with the ability to eventually expand up to 4.5 million passengers, and it's situated just 18 kilometers from the city. Finally, the new airport will also be the first to be built in Israel since the establishment of the state, and it will serve Israel not only as an additional international airport, but also as an emergency alternative to Israel's main airport, Ben Gurion International, near Tel Aviv. Today we are celebrating the Jewish holiday of Tubishvat, aka New Year's for the trees, and on this day when we celebrate life and nature, people here in Israel follow some traditions, like planting trees, celebrating outside, and eating dried fruits. But this year, the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development is trying to change our habits by recommending that Israelis replace the traditional dried fruit with the country's own homegrown fresh produce. The holiday of Tu B'Shvat is celebrated every year on the 15th of the Hebrew month of Shevat, and it marks the season in which the earliest blooming trees in the Holy Land begin a new fruit-bearing cycle. And the tradition of eating dried fruits, which was kept until today, dates back to the 3rd century when it was harder to get fresh fruit here in Israel, and there was no technology available to keep it fresh. But now the Minister of Agriculture, Uri Ariel, has issued a statement where he calls on Israelis to choose Israel's fresh fruits over dried fruits. Ariel explained that today most of Israel's dried fruit isn't actually even produced here, and in fact most of it comes from Turkey. So the minister is trying to encourage Israelis to support the local farmers and the country's own agricultural industry, adding that, quote, farmers are today's pioneers, and Israel's agricultural produce is among the best in the world, end quote. But that's not all. Ariel also warned about the high sugar and coloring content of dried fruit, explaining that they have much lower nutritional value than fresh fruit anyway. Similarly, in an interview with Yeshiva World News, the Sephardic rabbi Rav Mustafi seemed to agree with Ariel and also recently advised his congregants to cut their consumption of dried fruits. Again, mostly because they contain dangerous additives, including insecticides and even sulfur dioxide. And now for our Hebrew word of the day. With the new Ramon International Airport set to open in the coming days, today's word is lehamri, meaning to take off. Now, since planes mamri'im, or take off from the ground in defiance of gravity, it makes sense that lehamri shares a root with the word meaning to defy or disobey, though thankfully planes are typically much better listeners. And they're not the only things to lehamri or take off either. A suspenseful movie can lehamri or take off as soon as the action hits, and a career can lehamri or take off to new heights and successes when under the right circumstances. The trick there, though, is just to keep your eyes peeled for the right moment to seize. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be clear to partly cloudy and with a low of about 49 or 9 degrees Celsius. Then tomorrow you can expect mostly clear skies and with a slight rise in temperatures to a high of around 67 or 19 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.7 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you for watching.